Have you ever noticed how some things in life only make sense after they've already happened? A heartbreak that once felt unbearable later led you to someone kinder. A failure that made you question your worth became the doorway to something you never expected. It's strange, isn't it, how life seems to know the path, even when we don't? If you've ever felt lost but still found your way somehow, maybe this video is for you. And if this message touches you along the way, share one word in the comments. Trust. Part 1. The illusion of control. We often live as if we could steer the river, pouring all our energy into plans, forcing life to follow our will, believing that with just a little more effort, everything will fall into place. Yet, the illusion of control is subtle. It gives us comfort, while quietly tightening its grip. It's like holding a handful of wet sand. The harder you squeeze, the faster the water escapes, the more sand you lose. The Buddha said, clinging leads to suffering. That's not dogma, it's observation. Anyone who's ever tried to hold on to something that was ready to leave knows this truth in their bones. Look at nature. The river never argues with the banks. It simply finds the lowest path and flows on. A skilled rower doesn't fight the water, they read it, adjust their strokes, and let the current carry them. A surfer never commands the wave. They wait, sense its rhythm, and rise with it at just the right moment. When we try to control everything, someone's feelings, the timing of opportunities, the rise and fall of our own lives, we're attempting what neither the wind nor the tide ever does: to resist the natural law. But when we learn to trust the flow of life, we're not surrendering. We're cooperating with what is. Have you ever wished summer would come sooner by pulling the sun higher into the sky? It's impossible. The only thing we can do is plant seeds at the right season, water them, care for the soil, and let them sprout in their own time. A wise gardener doesn't tug the leaves to make them grow. They create the right conditions. Life works the same way. We plan, we learn, we stay mindful, but the seed of happiness blooms on its own schedule. Peace of mind appears when we realize that letting go isn't loss. It's freedom from what no longer belongs to us. Some people worry that if they stop controlling, they'll be swept away. But think of a kite. It flies high, not because we pull harder, but because we know when to stop pulling. Too tight, and the string breaks. Too loose, and it falls. True wisdom lies in knowing when to hold and when to release, a conscious kind of surrender. We do our part, then let life do the rest. You take care of your body, and healing happens naturally. You send your application, and the outcome ripens when conditions align. You love wholeheartedly, but whether someone stays is part of their journey, not your command. Acceptance isn't weakness, it's the strength of bamboo in the storm, bending so it doesn't break. When we cling, our minds become like a lake in the wind. The reflection of the moon shatters, and everything seems distorted. But when we relax and simply watch, the surface grows still, and the moon returns in full. Mindfulness isn't a lofty practice. It's the simple habit of coming back to the breath, noticing what arises, naming it without judgment. Then we see, most of our suffering doesn't come from life itself, but from our schedule for how life should unfold. Traffic isn't the problem. I must arrive now is. The rain isn't cruel. It had to be sunny today is. When the timeline inside you softens, the sky outside you clears. Try this small practice. When something doesn't go your way, don't rush to fix it. Breathe like roots drawing water from deep soil. Step back and look, like a bird rising above the forest, to see the whole landscape, not just one tree. Ask yourself, what's truly within my reach right now? Do that part, and let time, chance, and life's quiet wisdom handle the rest. This is non-attachment, not the absence of love, but love without possession. You still care, still try, but you stop insisting that outcomes look exactly like your plans. To trust the universe isn't naive. It's what experience teaches once you've seen enough to know that everything, even detours, belongs to the greater rhythm. When you stop struggling with the river, the far shore begins to appear, not because the river changed, but because you did. Letting go doesn't make you lost. It makes you lighter. It gives you ears to hear the water, eyes to see the currents, and a heart calm enough to know when to row and when to rest. That is the practice of self-awareness, knowing what you're doing, why you're doing it, and when it's time to stop. And one day, without even noticing, you'll see, life is still flowing as it always has, only now, you're no longer trying to bend it. Strangely enough, that's when everything finally falls into place. Part 2. The quiet wisdom of uncertainty. Uncertainty isn't a mistake in the system. It's the system's quiet intelligence at work. Think of morning fog over a valley. From the ridge, the road looks lost, but as the sun rises, the turns you couldn't see become obvious. Not knowing is like that fog. It slows you just enough to pay attention, to feel the ground under your feet, to notice the markers that were always there. When we rush to solve the unknown, we miss the soft clues life lays down, the way birds test the wind before taking off, the way a river tastes different channels before choosing a course. In that pause, growth begins. We often treat uncertainty as a verdict on our competence, as if a clear map proved our worth. But seeds germinate in darkness. The cocoon looks like a standstill until the wings are ready. Ocean currents shift without announcements. Sandbars redraw a coastline overnight. The living world advances by sensing, adjusting, and waiting for conditions to align. That's what mindfulness really is in daily life. Not a technique, but a way of noticing what's actually happening instead of clinging to what should be. When you practice this kind of noticing, self-awareness widens. You start to hear the difference between fear's urgency and truth's slower pulse. There's a humility that arrives when the future goes dim. Control relaxes its jaw, and listening walks in. You catch the coincidence that nudges you to make one call. You experience the delay that keeps you off a road you didn't know was closing. You feel the door shut, and after the sting, realize it turned your body toward a doorway that had been unlit the whole time. To trust the flow of life is not to romanticize randomness. It's to recognize pattern in motion, like reading the tide tables instead of yelling at the moon. You still show up, you still do the work, but you stop punishing yourself for not commanding the weather. This is where acceptance earns its reputation as strength. Acceptance is not resignation, it's alignment. Trees don't argue with winter. They pull sap inward, conserve energy, and prepare to leaf out when warmth returns. In the same way, you can let a season be a season. You can hold your effort steady and still let the timing breathe. Out of that posture, a surprising peace of mind emerges, not because outcomes are guaranteed, but because you're no longer waging war against reality. The fight drains away. Inner peace has room to gather. Uncertainty also teaches non-attachment in the most practical sense. You care without chaining your worth to results. You offer your best and release the rest. Watch a skilled sailor in shifting wind. The sail is trimmed, then eased. The course is corrected by a few quiet degrees. There's no drama, only partnership with the elements. That partnership is how you trust the universe without turning passive. You remain responsible for your choices, and at the same time, you acknowledge the wider forces timing, other people's paths, the thousand variables you'll never see. If you want proof that the unknown can carry wisdom, look up on a clear night. Ancient navigators found their way by stars they did not control. Cloud cover meant waiting. When the sky opened, they moved. The waiting wasn't failure. It was part of arrival. Life asks for the same rhythm. You act when the sky is open. You rest when it's clouded. You learn to feel the subtle green light inside the felt sense that says, now. Just as a storm carries that stillness right before rain, even heartbreaks and detours can belong. Wildfires, devastating as they are, also crack open pine cones that only release seeds and heat. A fallen tree pulls sunlight to the forest floor, and a whole understory awakens. Loss doesn't become good because we prefer happy stories, but meaning can grow in the ash. Uncertainty, held with care, composts into direction. You don't need to understand every bend in the road. You only need to honor that bends exist for reasons you'll often learn in hindsight. Walk as a gardener walks, attentive, patient, responsive to weather. Keep your hands in the soil of daily practice, rest, honest work, A few minutes of breath to steady the mind and let the roots do their hidden work. In time, the fog thins, not because you forced it to lift, but because you stayed present long enough for the path to reveal itself. Part 3. Letting go without losing yourself. Letting go isn't a quiet retreat from life. It's a deeper entry into it, minus the friction. Imagine a river meeting a bend. It doesn't argue with rock. It shifts its angle, keeps its speed where it can, slows where it must, and continues on. That's what letting go without losing yourself looks like in practice. You remain the river alive, directed, unmistakably you, while dropping the fight with what won't move. The result isn't apathy, it's alignment. From that alignment, a steady peace of mind begins to take root. The kind that doesn't need the world to behave before it can breathe. People who release control carry a certain quiet confidence, and you can spot it in small ways. They listen the way tall grass listens to wind, responsive without being uprooted. They don't force conversations because they're not trying to make the moment pay them back. They don't chase love because love that needs chasing is already sprinting the other direction. They don't demand certainty because certainty is a weather pattern, not a promise. Their freedom isn't luck, it's skill, the skill of moving with what's real. In Buddhist teachings, this is close to non-attachment. The heart stays warm, the hand stays open. Non-attachment is often misunderstood as coldness, but it's closer to clear water than to ice. Water takes the shape of any container and still remains water. In daily life, that means you keep your values as a river keeps its source unmistakable while letting the day pour itself into different forms. A meeting runs long, the plan changes. Someone's mood shifts like a passing front. With mindfulness, you notice your impulse to clamp down and just for a breath choose not to. That one breath is a hinge that changes the door. Tension softens and self-awareness widens enough to respond instead of react. Acceptance plays a central role here, and it's not submission. Acceptance is like reading the tide table before launching a boat. You don't love every wave, you respect its timing. You launch when the water supports you. You wait when it won't. That respect for conditions is a form of inner intelligence that protects your energy for the strokes that actually carry you forward. Over time, that habit builds inner peace, not because life grows easier, but because your stance toward life grows wiser. To let go without losing yourself, think of a lighthouse in shifting weather. The beam keeps turning, rain or shine. The point isn't to control the storm, it's to remain a reliable point of orientation. Your values are that beam. Honesty, compassion, steady effort, a willingness to apologize and repair where needed. Surrender in this sense doesn't erase the beam. It simply stops wasting electricity on trying to command the clouds. You keep shining, which is the most trustworthy thing you can do for yourself and everyone around you. When we cling to plans, we shrink the horizon to a single route and call it destiny. But life's larger map includes side roads we can't see from the ground. A forest knows this. A fallen tree looks like setback, yet the opening in the canopy sends light to the understory, and hidden growth begins. Letting go is consenting to that larger ecology, trusting that a closed path isn't a verdict, it's a redirection. This is how you trust the flow of life and, by extension, how you trust the universe. Not blindly, but with the same practical faith pilots use when flying through clouds, instruments steady, senses alert, ego quiet. Notice how the nervous system responds when you stop forcing outcomes. It settles the way a lake settles after the wind falls. The reflection sharpens, you can see the moon again. In that stillness, choices clarify. Your yes feels clean because it isn't a disguise for fear. Your no rings kind because it isn't a performance of toughness. This is the everyday fruit of mindfulness, attention anchored in the breath, the body, the sound of rain on the roof, simple things that bring you back to what is undeniably here. From here, you make fewer heroic rescues and more wise adjustments, like a sailor trimming the sail a few inches and gaining miles. Letting go doesn't cancel ambition. Think of a climber reading a mountain face. Handholds appear only when approached from the right angle. Grip too hard in the wrong spot, and you waste strength. Relax into the route the rock allows. and you rise. The same holds for creative work, relationships, health. You do your diligent part, then give space for emergence. Seeds sprout in darkness. Bread rises when you stop kneading. Muscle rebuilds in rest. Control has its place, steering, scheduling, safeguarding, but growth has its own calendar. Meeting that calendar with respect is how freedom and responsibility learn to share a room. And no, letting go doesn't strip your identity. It clarifies it. A kite finds its line in the wind. A violin finds its voice in the pause between notes. You become easier to recognize to yourself first, then to others because you are less tangled in resistance. You stop trying to make everything fit your plan and begin to sense the larger pattern your life has been sketching all along. That pattern doesn't erase your choices. It gives them context. It invites you to move like water, stand like a lighthouse, breathe like pine after rain. In that posture, you haven't disappeared. You've simply stopped wrestling the current and discovered, to your surprise, how far it can carry you. Conclusion. So what if life really does know exactly where it's taking you? What if all the wrong turns were never wrong? What if every delay, every silence, every goodbye was guiding you home? Maybe the path isn't something we find. Maybe it's something we remember when we stop fighting the flow. So today, try this. Take one deep breath. Trust where you are, even if you don't know where you're going, because the river never forgets its way to the ocean, and neither will you. If this message found you at the right moment, leave a flow in the comments, not for me, but as a quiet promise to yourself, that from now on, you'll trust the flow of your own life.